At the beginning of the conflict, the Spartans faced a setback that resulted in the loss of two prominent leaders. Lysander, a renowned war strategist who played a crucial role in their victory during the Peloponnesian War, was killed during the Battle of Haliartus in the region of Boeotia. Following this, King Pausanias, who arrived slightly later at the scene, faced a trial due to his delayed arrival and his failure to engage in combat to recover Lysander's body. He ultimately fled into exile as a result of the trial's outcome. Meanwhile, the second Spartan king, Agesilaus, was engaged in fighting against the Persians in Asia Minor. In the aftermath of the Battle of Haliartus, he was recalled to Greece. Agesilaus opted for a land route on his journey back home, leading a substantial army. While he encountered no difficulties in persuading the Greek forces from Asia Minor to join him, his contingents from the Peloponnesian region were less enthusiastic about abandoning their campaign against the Persians to fight against fellow Greeks. To encourage their participation, Agesilaus enticed them with promises of rewards for the best-performing contingent. In the early summer of 394, Agesilaus departed from Asia Minor with an army numbering around 15,000 soldiers under his command. Agesilaus proceeded swiftly through Thessaly, achieving a triumph near Mount Narthakion by defeating the renowned Thessalian cavalry. His victory was made possible through the use of mercenaries he had assembled and trained for the Persian War. Continuing his march, he forcefully entered Phocis, where he joined forces with his Phocian allies. There's a possibility that he was also joined by the Mora, sent from Nemea. During this time, news reached Agesilaus of a catastrophic defeat suffered by the Spartan naval forces at Cnidus. This defeat resulted in the destruction of the Spartan fleet and the death of its commander, Pisander. This information likely prompted Agesilaus to consider the potential consequences, as the Greek cities in Asia Minor were now susceptible to falling under Persian control. This development raised concerns about the loyalty of the part of Agesilaus's army that hailed from that region. To uphold the spirits and commitment of his soldiers and perhaps to secure their allegiance, Agesilaus took a strategic step. He announced that the recent battle had been a victorious one, despite the actual outcome, and he acknowledged the death of Pisander. Agesilaus commanded a diverse army with a range of different components. Among his forces, he had approximately 1.5 mora of Spartan soldiers, which amounted to around 1,680 individuals, assuming they were at full strength. The troops he had brought from Asia Minor included a contingent of Neodamodes, former helots who had been granted citizenship, as well as survivors from the 10,000 group. This group had initially supported Cyrus the Younger, and was now under the command of Euripides. Additionally, Agesilaus had around 6,000 troops from various regions of Asia Minor, including contingents from Aeolus, Ionia, and the Hellespont. Alongside them were 1,000 hoplites from Phocis and another 2,000 from Orchomenus. Altogether, the total number of hoplites in his army was approximately 15,000, possibly slightly fewer. Regarding cavalry, Agesilaus initially had 400 horsemen when he entered Ionia. He subsequently bolstered his cavalry by recruiting riders from northern Greek cities and Phocis. This effort resulted in a mounted corps that could have reached a strength of around 1,000 men. Positioned opposite Agesilaus's forces on the plain, near the base of Mount Helicon, was an opposing army composed of various contingents: Boeotians, Athenians, Argives, Corinthians, Euboeans, Aenianians, and Locrians. Unfortunately, historical sources like Xenophon do not provide specific estimates for the sizes of these forces. However, it is noted that both sides had roughly equal cavalry strength, while Agesilaus held a distinct and very significant advantage in peltasts. Considering the circumstances and the available information, we can make some assumptions. As the Boeotians were on their home territory, they likely had a larger force compared to their numbers at the Battle of Nemea, possibly around 6,000 hoplites. The Athenians and Euboeans, who had suffered fewer casualties at Nemea, might have fielded the same numbers as before, with approximately 6,000 and 3,000 hoplites respectively. Due to their losses and the necessity of defending their own territories, the Argives and Corinthians might have fielded smaller forces than at Nemea, potentially around 2,000 hoplites each. The Locrians might have contributed around 1,000 hoplites, while the Aenianians likely supplied peltasts. The cavalry contingent of about 1,000 troopers would have primarily consisted of Boeotians and Athenians. As the two armies drew closer to each other, Agesilaus took personal command of the Spartan soldiers and the Neodamodeus, positioning them on the far right flank of his forces. Directly adjacent to the Neodamodeus were the battle-hardened veterans from the 10,000 unit, led by Euripides. Following them were the Asian Greek contingents, and adjoining them were the Phocians. On the utmost left flank of Agesilaus's formation were the Orchomenians. Across from Agesilaus's forces, the Thebans were arrayed opposite the Orchomenians, while the Argive troops were positioned to confront the Spartans. As the opposing forces moved closer, a profound hush hung over both sides. However, when the gap had narrowed to about 200 meters, the silence was shattered by the powerful war cry of the Thebans. Filled with adrenaline, they accelerated into a swift charge, pushing forward with great intensity to engage the enemy at close quarters. The distance between the two armies diminished to just 100 meters when, responding to the battle cry, Euripides and his foreign brigade surged forth from the Spartan battle lines. Alongside them were the Ionians, Aeolians, and Hellespontines, all of whom joined this rapid advance. In this critical moment, every member of the mentioned contingents played their role in the initial charge. Within an instant, they found themselves within striking distance of the enemy's spears, effectively disrupting and overpowering the section immediately before them. On the right flank of the battle line, Argives were badly demoralized by their recent thrashing at Nemea River. The soldiers from Argos crumbled even before the Spartans could close in with their spears. These Argive troops discarded their shields and hastily fled toward the nearby slopes of Mount Helicon in a panic. This sudden flight triggered a domino effect, causing much of their army to follow suit. As Agesilaus' phalanx advanced across the field, victory seemed almost effortless due to the disarray of the enemy. However, the outcome on the Spartan left flank, which was positioned farthest from the king's command, differed from this swift success. There, the Theban forces managed to penetrate through an Orchomenian contingent, which appeared to have been deeply affected by their previous defeat against Thebes. Just as the Argives had been unnerved by their loss against Sparta, the Orchomenians seemed to have been similarly shaken. Believing that their fellow soldiers were achieving similar success, the Thebans continued their advance and even managed to breach the enemy's baggage train. At this moment, some of the foreign division were already in the act of crowning Agesilaus with the wreath of victory, when someone brought him word that the Thebans had cut through the Orchomenians and were in among the baggage train. Agesilaus acted swiftly upon learning that the Thebans were victorious and to his rear. Rather than attempting to replicate the tactics that had served him well at Nemea River, he gambled on a new strategy. Turning his phalanx a full 180 degrees, he boldly faced the returning Theban forces head-on. It was a daring move, a calculated risk that aimed to cut off the Thebans' escape route, using his Spartans and mercenaries as the vanguard. Effectively forming a barrier of steel, the rest of his army having scattered in pursuit. Probably at about even strength with Agesilaus, the Thebans formed up and closed front to front for a second round. The clash was no longer a quick exchange of blows, but a prolonged and brutal struggle. Shields locked against shields, the ground beneath them churned with the trample of feet and the spray of blood. Men fought with the desperation of survival, locked in a deadly embrace of pushing, shoving, hacking, and thrusting. Xenophon, who was both chronicler and combatant, would later recall the sheer ferocity of the engagement. Agesilaus, a figure of both leadership and vulnerability, stood at the heart of the maelstrom. His injuries were a testament to the violence that surrounded him. The battle became a tempest of wills, a clash of titans that defied the boundaries of human endurance. For the Thebans, it was a fight for redemption, for a chance to erase the memories of past defeats. And for Agesilaus and his Spartans, it was a battle to maintain their honor, their territory, and their very way of life. Yet amidst the chaos, a pattern emerged. Slowly, the Thebans managed to pry open a narrow gap in the Spartan line, the breach growing wider with every determined thrust, cutting a narrow path along which some of them escaped as their weary foes drew back on either side. Agesilaus' men soon recovered and turned to chase the Thebans. They killed many of the fleeing men, but most got away, 80 finding sanctuary in a temple while the majority joined their beaten allies on Mount Helicon. At day's end, the Spartans held the field, and Xenophon gave a detailed description. The earth stained with blood, friend and foe lying dead side by side, shields smashed to pieces, spears snapped in two, daggers bared of their sheaths, some on the ground, some embedded in the bodies, some yet gripped by the hand. The allies sent down from Helicon the next day to get a truce from Agesilaus, which he granted so that they might recover their dead. Probably the Thebans lost 500 to 1,000 spearmen and their allies another 1,000 to 2,000, while Agesilaus' cost was below 600. The Spartans suffered a minor setback in the aftermath of the battle. A raiding force commanded by the Pole Agesilaus was sent on a raid into Locris, but he was harassed by Locrian light troops as he retreated. The Polemarch and all 18 Spartans who were present were killed, and only a few of the troops escaped. This ended the campaign. Agesilaus disbanded his army, sending the various contingents home or back to their previous posts, and sailed south across the Gulf of Corinth to return to Sparta.